Hey, it's Matty P. What do you think of this? In D&D, the clock is always ticking. So when the players are over here, there's something going on over there. And when the players are over there, there's something going on over here. If the players were to stick their heads in the sand, what would happen to the plot if they didn't intervene? Would the baddies win? How would they win? What does that look like? What I'm suggesting today is you make a timeline for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. The first thing I'm suggesting you do is make a time tracker. So this is something you can just hang off the Dungeon Master's screen, plop it on there, clip it on with some clamps, and just put like a little thing up here to track, what time of the day is it? Because we're going to pay attention to what time of the day it is at any given point. And on the Dungeon Master's side, you can put notes about the tides or like the daylight, whatever you want. Now, I'm going to make a proper version of this for Patreon. I'll get an artist to make it. I'm not going to draw it myself. Clearly, I'm crap at that. You should make 2 of these 24-hour time trackers. And I want you to give them a title that's visible to the players. The first one is called The Day the Compass Rose Sinks. And the second one is called The Day of the Crossing of the Kingkiller Star, when Sparkrender's ritual will be complete. And remember, I want you to tell the players this information. Why? By telling the players the names of these 2 days and letting them know how much time is left in the overall campaign. What you're doing is establishing stakes, and you cannot have drama without stakes. So will the players know who Sparkrender is? No, of course they don't. Will they know what the Kingkiller Star and the ritual is? No. But what they will know is that they have 48 hours, and rituals kind of sound bad. Your players will pick up on that, and they will make very dramatic decisions because of this timer. When you're trying to juggle this stuff in your head, keep in mind the players will arrive around 1 a.m. on day 1, and this campaign ends when the Kingkiller Star crosses at midnight day 2. So if we're being meticulous about this, we need to know what causes this timer to run down. So that includes travel and random encounters and resting. When the players take a long rest, that's 8 hours. When they take a short rest, that's 1 hour. If you have a situation where the players are doing multiple scenes of role playing, like they decide to meet everybody at Dragon's Rest and go to their special little station, let's just say in aggregate that takes 1 hour. When the players are traveling between any locations on the island, it's going to take 3 hours or 2 hours each way, depending whether they're going by sea or by land. And you can get this handout, this little map with these distances, on my Patreon right now for $5 dues. Or you can take a screenshot, I don't care. If the players have a random encounter and have to fight a wandering monster, we're not going to make that take any extra time, because combat is really a matter of minutes usually, right? However, if they get dinged up and decide, we want to take a short rest after that combat, then that's going to take an hour as per the resting rules. So if we've got 48 hours here, let's work out how the campaign fits into that container. The players need to beat the Seagrow Caves, they need to beat the Compass Rose, and they need to beat the Observatory. Let's consider the worst case scenario of how long these could take. So I reckon the Compass Rose and Seagrow Caves will both take about 8 hours to complete, because that's 3 hours traveling there, 1 hour for a short rest if they happen to get a wandering monster and need to recoup. Then they complete the dungeon and they go, we're so tired, Dungeon Master. We'll have another short rest, please. And then they travel 3 hours to another location. But the final leg of the journey to the Observatory to fight Sparkrender, it's just going to take 3 hours to get there, and then they might get a random encounter on the way and decide to take a short rest. That's 4 hours total. So if the party just absolutely mad dogs it, they don't take any rests, they go content to content to content, they could complete this adventure, this whole campaign, in about 20 to 22 hours of game time. That leaves 28 hours for time wasting and resting and mistakes. But for those crazy dungeon masters who want to play on hard mode, remember how I mentioned hard mode? If you want to ramp up the difficulty, then you can give the players a little bit less time. So what you could do for hard mode, instead of 48 hours, I want you to roll a d6 to determine what time of the day the players crash on the island. So you could take up to 6 hours off their time frame. And at the other end of the scale, at the crossing of the Kingkiller Star, roll a d4, and that's how many hours earlier the crossing of the Kingkiller star will be. But this effort so far is useless if we don't add items to the timeline. So we're adding two kinds of things. The first is called a cycle, the other is called an event. A cycle is something that repeats day to day and usually has a broader effect on the players regardless of what they're doing. And an event is a specific thing that happens at a specific place at a specific time. There are 3 cycles we're paying attention to: daylight, the tides, and then NPC cycles. Daylight is something that's mainly going to affect creatures with sunlight sensitivity, like the kobolds or like the myconids, but we are going to add something to this. We're going to eventually inflict one of the players with sunlight sensitivity, so this one is worth paying attention to. When you're deciding which times are going to be daylight and which are going to be nighttime, you should just use your local cycle for that. For example, I'm in Melbourne, so it's daytime at around 6:30 and it's nighttime around 9 p.m. Why? The reason you should use your local daylight time is because it means your players don't have to ask you when daylight is. They're sitting around the table with you. They know when daylight is, they can answer their own questions, and that just saves a little bit of overhead. Then we have the cycle of the tides, low tide and high tide with nothing in between. According to the book, this is what it says. It says it's going to be low tide for 6 hours, then high, then low, then high. 6-hour cycles. It affects a bunch of stuff. In particular, we're looking at the Seagrow Caves and the Compass Rose here, and we'll cover this in more detail when we look at those specific dungeons, but the tides are going to change the conditions of the tests, because what if the players approach the Seagrow Caves at high tide? That might mean the Octopus Guardian can hide better and they will face a bigger challenge. Or if they approach the Compass Rose at high tide, maybe that means that not only is the very bottom deck submerged, but suddenly the second deck is also submerged and they have an underwater zombie encounter. Why? Because when these challenges are tied to the tides, it imposes a lot of strategic decisions on the players, because we can say, if you approach this cave at high tide, you're going to have a hard time. But if you approach at low tide, just wait 6 more hours, players, you'll have a much easier time. In the face of this timer, that is an interesting and dramatic choice to have to make. What do you prioritize, players? And the third kind of cycle is NPC schedules. Particularly at Dragon's Rest, there's a lot of characters going around, and I think it would be nice to work out during the day, according to their duties, what are each of these characters doing at any, given time? Like Tarek, does he start his mornings in the kitchen, and then he goes fishing, and then he tends to the garden? Like, when the players say, I want to go talk to Tarek, where is he? I'm suggesting this is something you make for yourself, for the NPCs that you care about, because it will help you learn a little bit about them. And let's do a bit of a why for this. Why? Not much. There's not a lot of reason why. It's just a wow factor. It's just a high fidelity storytelling thing to have on hand to impress your players. And in a bigger, more robust campaign that goes more than 48 hours, we couldn't really do this kind of thing because there'd be too many characters. But for Stormwreck Isle, we can do it. And sometimes it feels just kind of fun to impress the players. Now here's the real tricky part of this timeline: plotting events. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, plotting events? That sounds like railroading. It's not railroading, okay? We're just working out what the villains' plans are, what the NPCs' plans are, and how they all kind of interconnect. But the problem is that the players are going to be over here at Seagrow Caves, and then something might happen over here at the Compass Rose. And the players, we don't want them to feel like they're missing out. Now, since any of these events can happen off camera without the players, you need a way to handle that exposition in an organic way. Maybe it could be the players investigate and find some evidence of what happened, or maybe they see it in the distance, or maybe an NPC just tells them about it. So for each of the events I'm going to suggest below, I am going to include an example of how you can do the exposition. We're mainly looking at the events around Lord Aidron, the Bronze Dragon, and Sparkrender, the Blue Dragon. But when you're trying to work out what events do I want to put on my timeline, you should pay attention to these elements. Look at any part of the story and go, does this element have any kind of progression? Does it change over time? And if the answer is yes, go, okay, what are the stages of that change? Is the owlbear getting hungrier and meaner over time and becoming more of a threat? Then in that case, break those stages into discrete events and put them on the timeline in a specific location. Lord Aidron's first event happened weeks ago when he answered the summons of Runara to come and protect this cloister from the attack of Sparkrender, and he struggled with Runara's teachings of non-aggression. For exposition, just have Runara tell the players about this. Lord Aidron's second event, at the very beginning of the campaign, right up here, first thing they see when they are sailing to this island is in the distance, they see Lord Aidron and they see Sparkrender clashing and fighting in the sky. But they have an evenly matched fight and both dragons retreat. And the exposition here, of course, is they see it. Little asterisk about that one. For all of day one, for all of the day the compass rose sank, Lord Aidron is holed up in a cave somewhere in the forest on the island, just resting and healing. And eventually he's going to go fight Sparkrender again. And if you want some exposition about the fact that Lord Aidron's out there somewhere, well, they could encounter Lord Aidron as a random encounter and just have a chat. Or maybe one of the kobolds or Tarek or someone in town could say, "Ooh, I heard the breathing of a very dastardly and scary beast out there in a cave and I scampered away." And that beast would be Lord Aidron snoring. Lord Aidron's third event is that at 10 AM on day 2, he feels well enough to go confront Sparkrender again at the observatory. He gets there, he gets his crap absolutely rocked and gets captured by Sparkrender. This is another fight in the sky that the players will see from wherever they are on the island. Lord Aidron's fourth event is that at the very end of day 2, at the crossing of the Kingkiller Star, Sparkrender's ritual will be complete and Lord Aidron will be killed by sacrifice. And how will the players know this happens? Trust me. Trust me, they'll know. Now, let's take a look at Sparkrender's event. So, to understand these events, you've got to keep in mind the villain's plan. By the end of day 2, when the Kingkiller Star does its crossing and he does his ritual, Sparkrender needs to have collected 5 remains of 5 different dragons. Sparkrender's first event actually happened months ago when he arrived at the island, he settled in the observatory, and there he found the remains of 1 dragon, and he found the means and texts that he's trying to decipher to learn about this ritual and the Kingkiller Star. So that's 1 dragon collected. Sparkrender's second event happened just a couple of months ago when he attacked the Dragon's Rest cloister as he was searching for the remains of Astalagon, the dead bronze dragon. And the players can learn about this when Runara just tells them what happened. It's fine. So that's 2 remains of dragons he's collected. Sparkrender's third event is at the very start of day 1 where he battles Lord Aidron in the sky, and it is the same kind of thing. The players will see this in the distance. And his little asterisk here is that instead of going to a cave in the woods to heal, Sparkrender's going to be holed up in the observatory resting. Sparkrender's fourth event is at 6 AM on the first day when he commands a contingent of his kobold allies to go collect the bones at either the Seagrow Caves or the Compass Rose wreck. Now, whichever one he chooses to send these kobolds, that just depends on where the players go first. If they go to Seagrow Caves, hey, at 6 AM he has sent kobolds there, and vice versa. So exposition for this, you're going to have to leave some kind of evidence that the kobolds have been there taking things. Maybe somebody saw them, maybe they've left something behind, maybe they can be easily tracked, but the players work it out in some kind of CSI way. Sparkrender's fifth event is at 10 AM on day 2 when he sends another contingent of kobolds to the other location, and the players can learn about it in a similar way. That's Dragon Remains number 3 and Dragon Remains number 4. 1 more to go. Sparkrender's 6th event happens just a few hours before the ritual is meant to occur. When he leaves the observatory, he flies out over the ocean and dives deep into the ocean to retrieve the remains, a massive, comical skull or bone of Sharuth, the ancient red dragon. That's bone 5 out of 5. Sparkrender's 7th event, it is ritual time, baby, and it is bad news for Lord Aidron and his bones, because if the players manage to thwart the kobolds from collecting any of the bones earlier, or for some reason you've ended up with Sparkrender having only 4 sets of bones, then we'll just kind of retcon it and say that, oh no, Lord Aidron, when he sacrificed, he's going to be the 5th set of bones. This was the plan all along. Those are the 2 main storylines I want you to add to your timeline, but there's others you can add. So have a think for yourself about maybe the owlbear, maybe the sickness that's spreading amongst the myconids, maybe the harpy building its nest, maybe the threat of the zombies that are washing up on the island, maybe the cosmic effects in general from the crossing of the King Killer star approaching. What does that look like night after night as it gets closer? So break those down into progression steps, and then for each of those steps, plan an event, put it at a place, put it at a time. And if you do think of any cool events with some progression, leave them in the comments downstairs to share amongst people. But why? Why are we going to all this effort to add this stuff? Isn't this just railroading with extra steps? Look, we're doing it because it's good to take risks. Am I saying you need to do this to every campaign? No, of course not. You know, it would be too much work for a lot of campaigns. Maybe you'll do this and you'll hate it. Maybe you'll do it and you'll love it. But the thing is, as a dungeon master, if you want to grow, you got to take risks. We're covering one more thing. Don't go anywhere. Leveling up. Let's talk about leveling up. I super duper messed up when we were doing the Lost Mines of Phandelver, and I forgot to tell people when you're meant to level up. So I'm telling you now, we're doing something called milestone leveling. That means you do not need to track experience points, okay? It doesn't matter. It's just going to be leveling up after the party achieves something or at some dramatic milestone. So here's when you should level up. We start at level 1, okay? All the players start at level 1 together. Then, after they resolve the Seagro Caves, they hit level 2. Then, after they resolve the other one, the Compass Rose, they get the other level, so they hit level 3. And then they're going to face the final dungeon at level 3. But after they complete it, if you're moving on to another campaign, that might be an appropriate time to hit level 4. Don't click off this video, because I still need your help with something. All these people down here are patrons. I need help, okay? If you want to support the channel, please become a patron. That is what makes this whole thing viable. You will get a better version of this when I get my artist to make it. You will get a good little map for the island with distances between them and a bunch of other PDFs, all for just $5. And join the Facebook group where all these dungeon masters are talking about Stormwreck Isle right now. Thank you so much for watching. Links to everything downstairs. I don't know what else to say. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.